Welcome to the Deep Dive, your conversational shortcut to being truly well-informed. We dive into the source material you've shared, pull out the key insights, and give you the detailed analysis you need to really grasp the full picture.
Exactly.
Today, we're tackling an extensive examination of a life just filled with extremes. Ghislaine Maxwell.
And our approach today, it's got to be structured, factual analysis. We're really committed to looking at these sources objectively, tracing Maxwell's path from, well, immense privilege, almost hard to imagine, through that sudden collapse of her family's empire.
Right.
And then ultimately to her criminal conviction and where she stands now in the U.S. justice system.
Right.
It's obviously a very sensitive, very complex story.
Absolutely.
And our goal here is just to understand the facts as they're laid out in these documents.
And it really is a story that needs that context because the contrast, the sheer difference between her beginnings and her conviction, it's staggering.
It is.
So let's start with just the essential background. Who is she? Born Christmas Day, 1961, in France, a British former socialite educated at Oxford.
And straight away, we should note that complexity in her identity you mentioned. She holds triple citizenship, UK, French, and US.
Which becomes really important later, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That triple citizenship, as we'll definitely see, was a huge element in her later attempts to evade authorities. But the defining legal reality for her now, it comes from that 2021 criminal conviction. After a really high-profile trial, she was found guilty. 5 out of 6 counts.
Including child sex trafficking and conspiracy. Serious charges.
Very serious, and that led to a 20-year sentence.
Right. So she's currently serving time in the U.S., specifically federal prison Camp Bryan in Texas.
Correct. And the source material we're looking at today, it gives us this, well, this complete, if quite shocking arc, from the absolute highest levels of British and international society.
To a minimum security facility in Texas. It's quite the fall. Let's unpack those origins then, because they feel so crucial to understanding the kind of access and maybe the confidence she projected later on.
Definitely.
Yulin was the 9th child, the youngest of 9, born to Elizabeth and Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell, the Czechoslovak-born media tycoon.
And the environment she grew up in, it wasn't just wealthy, it was far beyond typical wealth.
You mean Headington Hill Hall?
Exactly. Her childhood home, Headington Hill Hall in Oxford, wasn't just a big house. It was a 53-room mansion.
Wow.
And it served simultaneously as the family home and the corporate headquarters for her father's big publishing company, Pergamon Press.
So home life and business were completely intertwined from the start.
Imagine growing up like that, where your home life and, high-level corporate dealings are happening in the same space. It must have just established a framework of power, maybe control, from a very early age.
That dual-function mansion as home, mansion as HQ, it must have normalized an incredibly high-pressure, high-stakes kind of world for her.
You'd think so.
What do the sources tell us about the early family dynamics? Anything specific that might have shaped her?
Well, the sources do point to a really profound early family tragedy. Just days after Ghislaine was born, her older brother Michael was in a severe car accident.
Oh, wow.
Left him in a coma. He eventually died in 1967.
So she was very young.
Very young. And her mother, Elizabeth, later reflected that this trauma, it just deeply affected the whole family, maybe created an atmosphere where, success and validation became incredibly important, perhaps to compensate for that emotional loss.
That makes sense. And within that dynamic, Robert Maxwell, her father, he clearly singled her out, didn't he? The sources seem quite explicit about that.
They are. He says he reportedly favored her heavily. I mean, he went so far as to name his enormous yacht, the one with the jacuzzi, sauna, gym, disco, the whole works, the Lady Ghislaine.
Naming a yacht like that after her.
That level of public, very material favoritism, it sends a strong signal, doesn't it, to the world, and probably to her too, that she held this unique, almost sort of ambassadorial role within his empire.
More than just a daughter.
Exactly. An extension of his status, his power.
And it seems he really groomed her for that role. I mean, look at her education, her early social life. It's a classic elite trajectory.
Absolutely. Blue chip. She went to Oxford High School for Girls, Headington School, then Marlborough College.
Prestigious names.
Very. And then Balliol College, Oxford. She graduated in 85. Modern history with languages.
And that Oxford period, the 80s, that really cemented her place in those elite circles, right? Yeah. Social, political connections.
For sure. The kind of connections that, well, become incredibly valuable decades later. She was already a prominent figure then, mixing with people like, Boris Johnson, Anna Pasternak.
And she wasn't just passive in that scene.
Not at all. She was actively building her profile, founded a women's club, named after the old Kit Kat Club, apparently, just further establishing her social credentials in London.
And she was a director at Oxford United Football Club, too, while her father owned it.
That's right. So involved in the family business side as well.
But her involvement wasn't just social or symbolic. The sources mention her first job for her dad was actually quite technical.
Yeah, training on a Wang 2200 computer, programming code way back in 1973.
Right. But by 1991, her role seems much more significant. He sent her to New York as his official emissary.
Flying first class on the Concorde,
Mm-hmm.
using that trip, that mission, to really gain a critical foothold in Manhattan's highest social circles.
It seems like a strategic move, almost.
It was perfect strategy, really. Use her social skills, her father's reputation and wealth to kind of pivot her into the American elite ahead of any potential trouble.
But that period of success, that ascent, it just crashed to a halt in November 1991, a massive turning point.
Devastating.
Oh.
It all started with Robert Maxwell's death. His body found floating in the Atlantic near the Canaries, close to the Lady Ghislaine.
The yacht named after her.
The very one. Now, the official verdict was accidental drowning. But it's worth noting the documentation says Ghislaine herself publicly challenged that later on.
She thought he was murdered.
In 1997, she asserted she believed he was murdered, said suicide was, quote, just not consistent with his character.
But regardless of how he died, the immediate result was this huge, just humiliating financial implosion.
Catastrophe is the word. The investigation that followed revealed Robert Maxwell had fraudulently taken over $400 million from the Mir Group newspaper's pension funds.
Affecting thousands of people's retirements.
32,000 people directly impacted. It was a massive global scandal. Her brothers were arrested in 1992, though they were later acquitted. But suddenly the name Maxwell was just toxic in the UK.
You can imagine. The sources suggest she faced pretty extreme social backlash, ostracism even, in the UK after that fraud came out.
Understandably. The name that used to open every single door in London suddenly slammed them all shut, and that seems to have forced her hands.
She needed an exit strategy.
A quick one. She bought a one-way Concorde ticket to New York, November 1992.
And how did she fund this escape, this new life?
The sources are quite specific here. She had a trust fund set up in Liechtenstein. It guaranteed her an annual income of £80,000.
Which, back then?
When you adjust that for inflation, for today's value, it's equivalent to nearly £217,000 per year.
Wow. More than enough.
More than enough to reestablish herself very quickly as a New York City socialite. She basically traded the collapsing elite structure of one continent for a fresh start in Manhattan.
It's the definition of a golden parachute, isn't it? Fleeing the shame, the scrutiny of the fraud, armed with £250,000 a year.
And immediately started building a new network.
And that new network, really, it seems to have centered pretty quickly on one person, Jeffrey Epstein.
And that brings us right to the core of so much of this source material. Her connection with Jeffrey Epstein, it seems to have started around February 1993, just a few months after she landed in New York.
Oh, some accounts suggest maybe they met earlier, through her father.
There are suggestions of that, maybe late 80s, but the relationship really seems to solidify once she moved there full time.
And defining that relationship, it feels complicated. It clearly changed over time, but the level of maybe closeness and control seems constant.
It's very complex. Initially, the sources talk about a romantic relationship. Early 90s, lasting maybe until about 1997.
Okay.
But the really critical point is that even after the romance ended, their close professional and social ties continued, unbroken, for over 25 years, right up until Epstein's death in 2019.
That duration, quarter of a century, is really significant.
It is. And it shifted very early on into this profound organizational role for her. Epstein's own household staff, they were quoted in the sources describing Maxwell with some telling labels.
Like what?
She was the main girlfriend, yes, but also things like the lady of the house. And maybe most revealing, his aggressive assistant.
Aggressive assistant. That implies real operational involvement.
Absolutely. The sources say she started hiring, firing, supervising his staff as early as 1992. That shows she took on this kind of control over his domestic life, his professional setup, almost immediately.
So clearly integral to his whole operation. This wasn't just her being a social companion. She was running things, the organizational backbone.
Exactly. Keeping his life running smoothly across multiple homes, multiple countries. And the financial ties, they really underline this deep professional connection.
How so?
Well, we see evidence of financial integration starting pretty early. 1995, Epstein renames one of his companies the Ghislaine Corporation. though that was dissolved a few years later.
Okay.
But more substantially, our sources confirm something interesting from March 2020. Maxwell actually sued Epstein's estate.
Sued his estate for what?
To get reimbursed for her legal costs. And her argument was fascinating. She claimed she'd been a long-time employee.
An employee?
Yes, from 1998 to 2006, specifically tasked with managing his huge property portfolio. U.S. Virgin Islands, New York, New Mexico, Florida, even Paris.
So she confirmed, under oath effectively, her deep professional role in his global real estate operations.
Precisely. And socially, Epstein himself seemed to validate how central she was. Remember that 2003 Vanity Fair profile?
Vaguely. What did it say?
He referred to her as my best friend. And the author of the piece observed that Maxwell seemed to organize much of his life. She was the gatekeeper.
The gatekeeper. That makes sense, given her background.
And that skill, that gatekeeping ability, honed probably in the Maxwell dynasty, that was their biggest asset together. She brought her existing elite social networks, the ones her father encouraged her to build, right into Epstein's world.
And together, they got access to just incredibly prominent people. Politics, law, academia, business, globally.
That's where the list of names in the sources becomes so, well, eye-opening. They shared friendships with U.S. presidents like Donald Trump and Bill Clinton, notable lawyers like Alan Dershowitz, and, of course, Prince Andrew.
And the sources say she was often the bridge, like with Clinton.
Sources acknowledge that Clinton, for instance, who Maxwell apparently claimed was her friend first, not Epstein's, became connected to Epstein through her.
Her ability to connect that old-world European aristocracy, her Oxford background, with new money American wealth, that was her unique value proposition, wasn't it?
Absolutely, her currency. And the Prince Andrew connection, that's particularly detailed in the source material.
How so?
Their friendship went way back to her university days, apparently. She's the one who introduced Andrew to Epstein. And critically, the sources detail the three of them socialized together, including attending a party Andrew threw at the Queen's Sandringham estate.
That's Sandringham.
In Norfolk, yes, in 2000, reportedly for Maxwell's 39th birthday.
That level of access is just extraordinary. And what's maybe even more astounding is how long that social standing lasted, even after Epstein's 2008 conviction, right, for soliciting a minor.
It seemed to barely affect her, publicly at least, for years. She was still showing up as an honored guest at major elite events, like the Clinton Global Initiative Conference in 2013.
Wow, so it wasn't until much later she started to disappear from view.
Seems it was late 2015 when she finally began retreating from the public eye, which suggests either a long period of denial or maybe just incredible confidence that the scandal wouldn't ultimately touch her. But the sources make it clear this partnership wasn't just about parties and status. There are allegations it involved a shared and deeply disturbing intent regarding their victims.
You mean like the claims in Virginia Giuffre's memoir?
Exactly. Her posthumous memoir, published October 2025, contained this really striking allegation that Maxwell and Epstein actually planned to have a baby together.
Okay.
And specifically sought to use Giuffre as a surrogate mother.
Using a victim as a surrogate.
Yeah.
That's, if true, that paints an incredibly chilling picture of the level of control, the ownership they allegedly felt they had.
It really does. It goes way beyond exploitation into this realm of reproductive psychological manipulation. It really underscores the alleged intensity, the darkness of their shared agenda.
And that connects directly to what we see emerging in the civil lawsuits, doesn't it? Where she's described not just as an organizer, but as an active participant in the alleged crimes.
That's the pivot point between the high society figure and the legal reality that eventually caught up with her.
Right, that shared agenda you mentioned, that's exactly what the civil lawsuits started targeting, wasn't it? The source material from those cases paints this consistent and frankly devastating picture of her core alleged functions.
It does.
Yeah.
Recruiter, instructor, and sometimes, according to some accounts, even an occasional participant in the abuse itself.
The recruiter role seems absolutely central in the allegations.
It is. The legal filings suggest the alleged recruitment was often quite methodical, targeted. Virginia Giuffre, who we knew as Jane Doe 3 in the court docs for a long time, she alleged Maxwell recruited her at Mar-a-Lago.
When she was working there?
Yes, as a spa attendant. Giuffre was just 16 at the time.
16. And the allegations go into detail about the grooming process, too.
They do. Giuffre stated, quote, "The training started immediately. And we're not talking subtle hints here. The sources detail explicit instructions.
On what?
How to provide sexual services, how to stay quiet, and crucially, how to be subservient to Epstein. And Giuffre specifically noted, a lot of this training came from Ghislaine herself.
So a direct, alleged managerial and instructional role in the abuse.
That's the allegation. And this idea of active training, it comes up repeatedly across different victims in the source material. Maria Farmer's affidavit from 2019, for example, added more alarming details.
What did she allege?
She alleged she was sexually assaulted by both Maxwell and Epstein back in 1996 at Leslie Wexner's mansion in Ohio.
Okay.
And beyond that, Farmer alleged that Maxwell and Epstein molested her younger sister, Annie, who was 15 at the time, in New Mexico that same summer.
Horrifying.
And the affidavit also detailed the alleged fallout. After Farmer reported it to the NYPD and the FBI, she claimed Maxwell repeatedly threatened her career, even her life, showing this alleged pattern of intimidation to ensure silence.
The timeline of these legal actions is important too, I think, to see how long this battle went on. It wasn't quick.
Not at all. A decade-long legal fight. Really, it truly ramped up in 2015. That's when Virginia Giuffre filed that defamation suit against Maxwell.
Because Maxwell had called her a liar publicly.
Exactly, for making claims about trafficking. And that case was crucial because it settled in 2017 in Giuffre's favor. The terms were sealed, but sources suggest Maxwell paid millions.
A loss in a defamation suit like that, it feels like a big warning sign for the criminal trouble ahead.
Definitely a precursor. Then 2017, you had Sarah Ransom v. Epstein and Maxwell. Ransom alleged Maxwell hired her for massages, then threatened her physically or career-wise if she didn't comply with sexual demands.
And that settled too.
Settled the next year, 2018. But after Epstein's arrest in August 2019, the floodgates really opened.
Right, with the Child Victims Act in New York.
Precisely. Jennifer Arauz filed suit against Epstein's estate and Maxwell under that act, later naming other alleged enablers too. Also in August 2019, Priscilla Doe filed suit.
What were her allegations?
Recruitment in 2006. And again, detailing how Maxwell allegedly trained her with step-by-step instructions on providing sexual services to Epstein. The consistency in the alleged method is really striking.
And then Annie Farmer, Maria's sister, she sued too.
Yes, in November 2019, sued Maxwell and Epstein's estate, accusing them of rape, battery, false imprisonment, related to those alleged 1996 events in New Mexico.
Her testimony would become crucial later.
Very. Then January 2020, another Jane Doe lawsuit, alleging recruitment of a 13-year-old music student back in 1994, and claiming Maxwell participated in the assaults.
So while all these civil suits are piling up, Maxwell tries a legal move of her own.
Kind of a defensive maneuver, yeah.
What?
In March 2020, she sued Epstein's estate for her legal costs.
Based on that employee claim.
Exactly. Trying to invoke her claimed employment status from 98 to 06, managing his properties. She argued Epstein had promised to cover her legal defense fees, filing that while facing trafficking allegations yourself. It's a bold move.
It certainly complicated things. And that brings us to her evasion tactics. Because after Epstein's arrest in 2019, she basically just vanished.
She did, and her lawyers played a key role, demonstrating some remarkable legal footwork, repeatedly refusing service for lawsuits in 2019-2020.
How could they do that?
Claiming they genuinely didn't know her address or didn't have permission to accept the documents for her. It was effective stalling.
And this wasn't exactly a new trick for her, was it? The sources mentioned something from 2010.
Right. Apparently, she left the country right before a scheduled deposition back then, claimed her mother was deathly ill.
But then
Resurfaced about a month later for Chelsea Clinton's wedding. So the sources suggest she'd mastered being socially visible when it suited her, and completely invisible when legal pressure mounted.
And law enforcement was actively looking for her by this point. The U.S. Virgin Islands considered her a key witness, right?
A critical fact witness in their civil suit against Epstein's estate. They knew she held essential pieces of the puzzle regarding the money, the whole operation.
And her hiding places, they weren't just random crash pads. They suggest a deliberate, well-funded effort to disappear.
Absolutely. By 2016, she's basically unphotographed at public events. Sources confirm she adopted this very low-key life in Manchester by the Sea, Massachusetts. Apparently went by the initial G.
Just G.
Just G. But her final hiding spot was even more secluded. A huge 156-acre property in Bradford, New Hampshire.
And she had security there.
Employed former British military personnel as security detail. This wasn't someone panicking. It was a calculated, well-resourced operation to stay hidden.
And while she was physically hiding, she was also fighting this legal battle to keep documents sealed.
Constantly. Especially the documents from that Giuffre civil suit. Maxwell and her lawyers fought tooth and nail to prevent their release, even after Epstein died in August 2019.
That fight went on for years.
It did. consumed huge legal resources. It wasn't until late 2019, and then in batches through 2024, that large chunks were finally unsealed, thousands of pages. But only after years of her trying to obstruct their release. It shows how committed she was to controlling information.
That really elaborate evasion, though, it came to a pretty abrupt end in July 2020. Her arrest in New Hampshire, the details of how they found her are quite something.
They really are. They underscored just how difficult it was for law enforcement to pin her down, given her sophistication.
How do they do it?
The FBI located her, not through typical surveillance methods, but using a message catcher. It's a mobile phone tracking device, often called a stingray.
Like something out of a spy movie?
Pretty much. They tracked calls she was making to her husband, her sister, one of her lawyers. It's quite a detail, isn't it? A British socialite hiding out in rural New Hampshire tracked using technology usually reserved for, counterterrorism or major organized crime.
It shows the level of effort involved. So she's arrested, initially faces 6 federal crimes,
which were then expanded in March 2021, adding sex trafficking of a minor and conspiracy involving a 4th girl who was only 14.
And she pleaded not guilty to everything.
Pleaded not guilty to all charges.
Then came the bail fight, which was pretty intense.
Highly contentious. Her request for bail was flatly denied by the judge, Allison Nathan. And the judge's reasons are really key because they kind of summarize everything we've been talking about.
What did the judge cite?
Her proven history and skill at living hidden, her possession of those 3 passports, UK, French, US, and the fact that her finances were described as, quote, completely opaque.
Those 3 passports, especially the French one, must have been a huge red flag.
Massive. Because France has this long-standing policy, they generally don't extradite their own citizens.
If she made it to France,
the U.S. justice system would likely lose jurisdiction entirely. Made her an enormous flight risk.
Yeah.
Even when her husband, Scott Borgerson, turns out she'd quietly married him in 2016, offered a $22 million bail package.
The court rejected it.
Rejected it. Too much risk.
So she's held in pretrial detention, and her lawyers started complaining about the conditions.
They did. At the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, in Brooklyn. Her lawyers argued the conditions were excessively punitive.
What specifically?
They alleged really extreme measures, including having guards shine a light in her cell, in her eyes, every 15 minutes, ostensibly to prevent suicide attempts.
And they linked that directly to Epstein's death.
One of her attorneys did, explicitly, saying something like, "She's not Jeffrey Epstein, this isn't right," and claiming the harsh measures were because Jeffrey Epstein died on their watch.
So those complaints really highlight the extraordinary scrutiny around her whole case because of the Epstein connection.
Absolutely. Now, before the main trial could start, the judge made a key ruling. Maxwell would face 2 separate trials.
Why 2?
One for the sex trafficking charges, and then a second, later trial for perjury charges related to things she'd said under oath in those civil depositions.
Okay, so focus on the sex trafficking trial first. It started in November 2021.
Right. And the prosecution really honed its case, focusing on 4 primary victims, even though the sources suggest there might have been over 100 victims identified in the whole scheme.
And what was the prosecution's main argument, their theory of the case?
They presented it quite vividly, arguing Maxwell and Epstein ran this sophisticated pyramid scheme.
A pyramid scheme? How?
Based on rewarding vulnerable girls who successfully recruited other vulnerable girls into their circle, essentially turning them, as the prosecution put it, into prostitutes for hire. It was a framework designed to show her instrumental managerial role in the whole thing.
And the evidence came from?
Critical evidence came from people inside Epstein's world and from the victims themselves. Juan Alessi, who was Epstein's concierge, provided key details about the daily operations, Maxwell's involvement.
Right.
But arguably the most powerful testimony came from Annie Farmer,
Maria's sister, who sued earlier.
Exactly. In what must have been an incredibly difficult act of courage, she was the only victim witness to use her real name during testimony, speaking publicly about the alleged molestation back in 1996.
That must have carried enormous weight.
You have to assume so. The prosecution really leaned on the consistent pattern of control, recruitment, alleged abuse presented by these witnesses.
And Maxwell herself, did she testify?
She chose not to testify in her own defense. That decision drew some comment, particularly as her family's spokesperson had previously claimed she was too fragile to take the stand.
Interesting. So the jury hears all this.
And they deliver the verdict on December 29, 2021. Guilty. On 5 of the 6 counts, including the most serious charge, sex trafficking of a minor.
Then came sentencing, June 2022. What did the prosecution ask for?
Prosecutors pushed for a tough sentence, at least 30 years, really emphasizing the devastating lifelong impact on the victims.
And the judge?
She was ultimately sentenced to 20 years. But the judge's statement during that sentencing hearing, it provides a really vital insight from the source material about how the court viewed her specific role.
What did the judge say? It was about her not being a proxy for Epstein, or...
Exactly. The judge said something like, "I will pause on those words for a moment. By and with Epstein." It is important to emphasize that although Epstein was, of course, central, Ms. Maxwell is not being punished in place of Epstein or as a proxy for Epstein.
That's a really crucial legal point.
It's critical. It means the judge was actively pushing back against any narrative that Maxwell was just following orders or was only being punished because Epstein wasn't there to face justice himself.
Instead, the judge stressed she was being punished for her role.
Her instrumental role and her personal participation in the abuse, confirming the wide scope of her involvement in the conspiracy, according to the court.
Since that conviction, though, she's kept appealing, hasn't she?
Persistently. Right away, she sought a retrial, based on this claim about juror non-disclosure.
What was that about?
That one juror hadn't disclosed during jury selection that he had experienced childhood sexual abuse himself. The judge looked into it, but dismissed the request for a retrial in April 2022.
But her legal team didn't stop there.
No, they kept challenging it, moving up the court system. Her conviction and sentence were upheld by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit in September 2024.
And the Second Circuit, for listeners, that covers federal appeals from New York, Connecticut, Vermont, so a major hurdle.
A critical step, especially for high-profile federal cases out of Manhattan.
And the final legal attempt was the Supreme Court.
The ultimate long shot, yes. In April 2025, her lawyers petitioned the Supreme Court to hear an appeal.
On what grounds?
It hinged on a pretty complex legal question about whether a deal made by one federal prosecutor could bind prosecutors nationwide, trying to find a technical way out.
Did the Supreme Court take the case?
No. In October 2025, the Supreme Court denied the request to hear her appeal.
So that path seems closed. What about that second trial, the perjury charges?
Right. She still technically faced those 2 perjury charges from the civil suit depositions. However, the prosecutors had already indicated those charges would likely be dropped if she was sentenced on the trafficking charges as scheduled.
Which she was.
Which she was. So effectively, her criminal legal exposure for the trafficking conspiracy seems resolved with that 20-year sentence.
Before everything completely imploded, Ghislaine Maxwell did try to build this other public image, didn't she? Separate from Epstein. That was the Terramar Project.
Yes, the Terramar Project. It was a nonprofit she founded back in 2012, ostensibly dedicated to ocean protection.
An attempt to rebrand herself?
It certainly looks like an attempt to cast herself as a global philanthropist and environmental advocate. And the sources note she used that platform quite effectively for a while. Gave a lecture, even a TED Talk on it in 2014.
And attended UN meetings.
High-level meetings at the United Nations in 2013. It definitely provided this veneer of legitimacy, helped maintain her social access in those years after Epstein's first conviction, but before the second wave hit.
But that whole project just vanished pretty quickly once the new charges against Epstein landed, right?
Instantly. The sources confirmed Terramar closed down completely, abruptly, on July 12, 2019.
When was that relative to the charges?
Less than a week after the new federal sex trafficking charges against Epstein became public in New York.
Wow. The timing is stark.
The immediate, total shutdown, it really speaks volumes about how vulnerable her public persona was, maybe the potential legal exposure of the organization itself. An associated UK company was officially dissolved by December 2019, too. Just swift, catastrophic fallout from the scandal hitting her public life.
And the recent political context around her, it keeps evolving, doesn't it? Reflecting the ongoing interest in her knowledge and the powerful people connected to the whole affair.
Definitely. We mentioned earlier the U.S. Virgin Islands considered her that critical fact witness in their suit against Epstein's estate. That shows how valuable her information is seen in pursuing others potentially involved, especially regarding the money trail.
And then there was the commentary from the White House after her arrest.
We have to mention that. Then President Donald Trump, shortly after her arrest in 2020, said, I just wish her well.
Which caused quite a stir.
Immense reaction. He defended it a couple weeks later, telling journalist Jonathan Swan something like, "Yeah, I wish her well. I'd wish you well. Good luck. Let them prove somebody was guilty."
Oh.
That comment, documented in the source material, sparked intense debate about their relationship and the implications of such a statement from the president.
Fast forward to 2025, and the scrutiny shifts to Congress.
Right. July 2025, the U.S. House Committee on Oversight and Accountability gets involved. They formally subpoenaed her
To testify about Epstein.
to testify under oath about her involvement with Epstein.
And her response.
Immediate and strategic. Just days later, her lawyer fires back, demanding immunity from any further prosecution before she'd agree to testify.
Playing hardball.
Absolutely. It highlights the political leverage her information holds and her clear legal strategy: withhold testimony unless she gets full protection.
And this interest in her knowledge, it was partly fueled by other reports, too, like that scrapbook detail.
Exactly. Reports, including one in the Wall Street Journal, detailed her role in curating Epstein's social standing. And the source material confirms that specific detail. A 50th birthday scrapbook Maxwell put together for Epstein back in 2003.
What was in it?
It contained a personal letter of congratulations from Donald Trump.
That's a concrete example of the kind of elite access she provided him over decades.
It illustrates it perfectly. She wasn't just making intros. She was actively curating the validation, the social proof he needed to maintain his standing among the global elite.
The Department of Justice also wanted to talk to her.
They did. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche interviewed Maxwell in July 2025. That was a significant development.
And what came out of that?
The source material confirms that during that interview, Maxwell explicitly stated that Trump hadn't done anything concerning in her presence. Details were released in August 2025. It clearly shows investigators are probing any potential high-level political connections.
And finally, this recent controversy about where she's actually incarcerated.
Right. In August 2025, she was transferred, moved from FCI Tallahassee to Federal Prison Camp, Bryan, in Texas, which is a minimum security facility.
And FPC's federal prison camps, they're generally seen as less restrictive.
Generally, yes. Often designed for nonviolent offenders. Sources often describe them as being among the less stringent environments in the federal system.
So that move sparked immediate controversy. People saw it as potential special treatment.
That was the perception, definitely. The White House publicly denied any preferential treatment, said the move was routine based on her security classification. But the appearance of leniency was strong.
Leading to a political response.
A direct one. U.S. Representative Roger Krishnamurthy proposed a formal resolution in Congress.
To do what?
Specifically designed to oppose granting Ghislaine Maxwell any kind of pardon, commutation, or other form of clemency.
So Congress weighing in directly against any future leniency.
Exactly. That legislative action just shows the significant ongoing political sensitivity, the intense scrutiny surrounding any hint of special treatment for her, even now, while she's serving her sentence.
Well, this has certainly been a deep dive. We've really traced Ghislaine Maxwell's journey, haven't we, from the absolute peak of British society through that shocking Maxwell family financial crash, and then into this incredibly deep, decades-long, and ultimately criminal partnership with Jeffrey Epstein.
And if there's one unifying thread that runs through all the source material we've looked at, the civil suits, the criminal trial testimony, even the judge's own words at sentencing,
What would that be?
it's the consistent pattern pointing to her instrumental role. She wasn't just defined as a passive girlfriend or a mere socialite. The evidence consistently portrayed her as an active facilitator, a recruiter, an essential participant in the abuse scheme that lasted for decades and spanned multiple continents.
And if we pull back and look at the bigger picture, it really seems her particular genius was cultivating those high-profile connections. A skill maybe learned from her father's world, then perfected alongside Epstein.
Absolutely.
The fact that just one item, like that 50th birthday scrapbook from 2003, could contain a personal note from a future U.S. president, it just perfectly captures the immense, incredibly insulated social sphere they moved in.
And it's the protection offered by that sphere, the access, the murky finances, the multiple passports, the ability to hire security and just disappear that made bringing her to justice so incredibly difficult.
Which brings us back, interestingly, to the moment she was actually caught. Despite all those resources, her proven skill at evasion, hiding out on that remote property with ex-military security, the FBI ultimately had to use that MSI catcher, that Stingray device, to track her mobile phone and pin her down. So the question we want to leave you, the listener, with is this. What does the fact that they needed to deploy such advanced, almost extraordinary tracking technology tell us? What does it reveal about the unique challenge posed by that kind of absolute social and financial power when it finally comes up against the pursuit of justice.
It really suggests, doesn't it, that for someone with her specific profile, the connections, the resources, the international mobility, the standard tools of law enforcement just weren't enough. It truly underscores the exceptional difficulty involved in penetrating that kind of extreme privilege.
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this extensive deep dive into the source material.
We hope you'll reflect on these details.
Until the next deep dive.